All right. Welcome everyone to this episode of Monetizing Your Mental Capital. I am super excited. I have the founder of VAA, basically a virtual assistant guru. Gilad, tell us a little bit about VAA.
All right. So first of all, thanks for having me. My name is Gilad and I'm the founder of VAA Philippines. VAA Philippines is an Amazon-focused company, so we really specialize on that. And we recruit virtual assistants from the Philippines and we train them to work specifically with Amazon sellers. By 2024, we have more than 600 VAs working for us, and we serve more than 400 Amazon sellers. Most of them are high-level sellers, agencies, aggregators that are using our VAs. So I could definitely say that over the years, we got very experienced in understanding what a VA can help sellers and how to do it correctly. So I'll be happy to give you some insights from that.
Hey, I'm excited to chat about that. I think you've definitely got some ears perked up here. My next question is more specific to monetizing mental capital. So as we dig into this podcast, our goal here is to help individuals who currently are e-commerce sellers or currently in the day-to-day grind. So they maybe are an entrepreneur or they're just working at a job somewhere and they're hoping someday to monetize their mental capital and create something new. And so why would one of those individuals who's looking to take knowledge and turn it into a service or turn it into a product or turn it into a SaaS product or whatever, why would they want to ask you questions? What experience do you have monetizing mental capital?
Well, I started as an employee and then I had all this phase of becoming an entrepreneur, quitting the job and so on. We can definitely talk about it if you want. But after that, as an entrepreneur, I became an Amazon seller. And from there developed, VA Philippines. So VA Philippines actually developed from my own experience and from the knowledge that I started to gain about hiring virtual assistants, plenty of mistakes that I did, and understanding that, the more I dig into, the more I become knowledgeable about how to find good VAs, how to train them, how to make them stay with you for years, then I realized that there is value here that I can, give to other people. In the beginning, by the way, I did it for free. I mean, people just said to me, hey, Gilad, you have a very good, team of VAs here. You told me about that, you went through a lot to find them. I need a VA now. Could you find me one, exactly the one like the way that you did for your company? And I did it in the beginning. And then, somebody else asked the same question. And at a certain point, I realized, wait a minute, I think I have something here. I invested so much time and effort into learning how to do it different from others, and I can monetize it. So yeah, I'll be happy to share.
I love that. That's a fantastic stage to set in terms of just kind of how you dug in there. And I love the way that you just described that in terms of I was just doing it for free for people. And then how many did it take? How many people got it for free before you were like, wait a second?
I think two, three. Well, first of all, in order for people to reach out to me and to ask, I had to go through a lot because I hired VAs for my own company as a seller. Because this is how it all started for me. I started in 2015. I manufactured in China and sold on Amazon US camping equipment. And I needed VAs for the business. And every time I got it wrong, I hired the wrong people and I went over the process that so many people are doing the regular way. And then I realized that the regular way is not the good way. And then I became better and better into finding good people different ways, my own techniques of finding them, screening them and training them. And this is how it started.
So I've tried to monetize mental capital many times and I've failed many times where I had an idea and I was like, oh, this could be the most amazing product or service on the planet. And it just flops. Like I'm obviously wrong. People didn't want it. All of those sorts of things. Had similar situations where things didn't take off.
Yeah, it was not on e-commerce. It was before that. It was my first entrepreneurial step. I started as working for a ski company. I was skiing all the time and I do something completely different now, but I created like a video editing company that, I had my equipment and I would ski with people and take a video of them while skiing and then editing it for them. And selling them these video, edited with, music and so on, their personal video experience of their skiing. And it failed for many reasons, I think. But the biggest issue, I think, is that I was not committed enough. I was still working for the other company. They allowed me to do something, on the side while still working for them. And I think that was a lesson that I learned afterwards, that if you want to do something, you have to be all the way in. If your back is not to the wall, that you think, okay, you know what, worst case, it will not happen. And then I can always keep my current job and so on. Then most likely is that you'll keep your current job and you'll never break through. And that what happened to me because I was not all in. I didn't risk anything here so much except for money, for the investment, but not really like risking everything. And this is what I learned from the next experience, that if you want to do something, you do it all the way.
I love that. So obviously there are some things that you can do to kind of decide what to do. So when you said like, you have to have your back to the wall, in my mind, I go straight back to like Star Wars when they're in the trash compactor and like everything's squishing, right? Like you have to be at a place where there really is no way out beyond success in this venture, right?
Right.
And at that point, if you've got a way out, you'll take the path of least resistance, right? You'll run the other way. What are some of the ways that you would recommend making sure your back is to the wall when it comes to going all in?
So for me, it was the decision to quit the job that I had. I did it in the beginning. I quit and then I started something new as a seller. And then I came back to another job and then I started VAA in the same time. And it was going very slow because I was always committed to another job. And I think it's always connected to that. If you're making calculations of this new thing that I'm, developing, am I getting paid enough here to stop doing, the other job and going into this one? That's a wrong calculation because then you'll wait until it grows big enough, but maybe it will never grow that, the high. And the only way for it to grow high enough is if you completely stop. And obviously there's a risk. There's a difference if you're, single compared to if you have like 3 kids at home and so on. But each one should make their own risks. But for me, it was really that point. The moment that I said, you know what, whatever it means, it means. And me and my wife, we had a baby at that time. I did risk a lot over there. We moved apartments to something, that was cheaper. We moved areas in Israel to something that we could afford to build this. So we did take risks here. And we did understand that, that's the way to do it. Not like, let's stay at our home, everything, have a baby. Let's not risk anything. Let's continue the other job and build it in the same time slowly, because then it wouldn't have never succeeded, I think.
Interesting. So you did some things to mitigate that risk. Just looking at the timeline here, and I know I'm zeroing in a lot on this decision. I think part of that is that we haven't really explored this a lot on the podcast. And so your decision-making process here, I think, is going to be valuable for our listeners. Let's go back in time a little bit. When was the first time you remember monetizing mental capital? Was it the ski video, or was there a lemonade stand far before that? We had a guy who was selling soda pop out of his bedroom, to his brothers and sisters kind of thing. All sorts of different ideas around that. What was the first time that you can remember?
That was the first time, because before that, I was in college, and then in Israel, you have to go to the military, and I served, 7 years over there. Once I got out, then I did like a trip, a hiking and so on, and came back and started working. And that was my first step. So I knew that I wanted to be my own boss and to create something new, but I did it slowly and I tried experimenting little things. And that was good. I learned a lot from this. And the next step was already after the ski thing, it was already like becoming an Amazon seller. And like I said, I quit that job, me and my wife. So we actually both quit our jobs and started selling on Amazon. And that was the second time that we, really like went in. And every time we learned, what else you need to do in order to make it a...
Hold on. Were you working for a ski company? What was the job that you were working for?
I lived in France and I was the one in charge of all the aspects of... It was a tourist company. They sent people from Israel to skiing in France. In Europe, basically. I lived in France at that time and working for the company and, preparing the hotels, the ski companies.
Nice.
All the package, signing the deals and so on, doing these things for other people, working closely with the owner of the company. And I learned a lot from him. And this is also something that I think helped me. When you work closely to a decision maker in a big company, then you learn a lot about the risks that they're taking. And it helps you afterwards to understand this, how they make decisions on marketing, how they feel about spending a lot of money on something they don't really know if it will work or not.
Yeah.
And I think it helped me as well.
So you were working with the owner closely, and at some point while you were there, you kind of saw people selling on Amazon. Is that kind of where that went?
Yeah, that was the second attempt, right? The first attempt was the
ski.
Yeah. And then I continued to work in the same company. Like I said, I didn't want to quit a job. And then the second time was again selling on Amazon while working over there. But then I said to myself, here, if we're just testing a little bit,
We got to do this.
I'm not playing with both for too long. We had our first sale in December. We launched the first product on December 7th.
And what year was that?
2015. We sold our first camping hammock at that time. January, I already quit the job.
How many sales did you have before you quit?
A lot, but you know what? It pushed me so much. But every seller now and I would say, yo, this guy is such an idiot. Everyone sells on Christmas. But for me, wow, it works. I'm going through all in for that. So,
and you had a month's worth of validation in December. And looking back, you're right. Did sales continue to do well after December?
No, well, it did, but not in a way that could provide for us, and it didn't grow as much as we thought it would, obviously, because we started in December, and then came January and February and March, and sales were good, but not close to December. And then it was, okay, how do we, get money?
How do we survive?
But still keep this business and still, work on it. And now all the time was, okay, let's do some gigs here and there, but it was always with the intention of not to have anything full-time job.
Don't let it distract from the main goal. So side gigs, other things to pay the bills, 100%, but with the intention to continue focusing on the Amazon seller business. And how long were you an Amazon seller before the VA thing started popping up?
About 2 years.
About 2 years.
2 years.
You realize you're going to have to send your wife to some of these trade shows. I would be willing to bet she's way better looking. So, I mean.
Yes. And last time, actually, we went to the Titans event in Cancun.
Love it. So you were a seller for 2 years and you've sold that business, or do you still have that business in the background?
I still have it in the background because I need this business in the background to always experiment and understand what sellers are thinking and what's important for them for our business.
Could not agree more with you. So Seller Labs has been going through several transformations. And at the very beginning, Brandon Checkitts, the founder of Seller Labs, he and his co-founder at the time, Paul Johnson was his name, they both were Amazon sellers. They were selling cases and cases and cases of books. I mean, just like an entire warehouse. Imagine an entire warehouse full of textbooks. And they were trying to figure out how to get better feedback and all of that kind of stuff. And so they built a piece of software for themselves and monetized their mental capital. Yeah. I could not agree more that you need to keep that Amazon business, because they decided, okay, I'm going to focus on software because that's what we're really good at. And they did that. And there were a couple of people inside the business who continued to do Amazon seller kind of stuff. But the founding team kind of moved away from that a little bit. And so we're really excited at Seller Labs because just recently we shifted gears a little bit. Our services team went and they were purchased by AO2 Marketing. And so that services side of the division is no longer part of Seller Labs. And Seller Labs focused on technology. But at the same time, a new owner joined the team. Nan Dean is his name. He's an 8-figure seller. And he's had so many ideas for building new pieces of software over the last 10 years.
Based on his experience as a seller.
Exactly. So what you just said about monetizing your mental capital and then not only continuing to monetize, that's fascinating. Continue to be your own customer is the moral of that story. Like if you lose touch with that customer because you stop becoming one, you could end up in a similar. I think Seller Labs could be a lot larger than it is today. And I think it's not because we lost touch with our roots. And now as we've dug back in and we're connecting with those roots, amazing things are happening. So good for you for connecting and recognizing that's important.
First of all, VAA would not exist without me as a seller because I would not know, what my customers, how they think, what they need and how to develop something that they don't have and understand exactly what they need. And I hear this always again and again. I talked with Yoni from Getida about his business and exactly the same story. It's always coming from the need of a seller. But in the same time, I would say to you that a lot of people, they try something, they try to be sellers and then sometimes it's not working for them and then they quit. And people tell you like all the time, don't quit, you should go in. But a lot of it is not just necessarily to continue, don't quit to become a seller, but it's because you go into something, then you become knowledgeable about that. You become an expert in that. So maybe it's not going to work out as a seller, for example. So you change direction, you become a service provider. You have the knowledge already that you invested in and you became an expert at. So, don't quit, meaning like go in and see all the possible ways instead of just, completely quitting and looking for a different job. not understanding that you have value now, even if you failed.
So that's actually fascinating because we've been talking about how you've got to go put your back to the wall and
Right.
go in 100%. You have kept your seller business, and so you didn't sell it. And so in some ways, you could have always gone back to being an Amazon seller. What did you do to make it so that you leaned in hard with VAA?
It was not really like I didn't keep it in order to always have somewhere to go back. I kept it so I could always continue to experiment. I would have a Sell Central that is active, that I could try things and I could train my VAs on that. But it was not like balancing between the two and see what works more.
That's interesting. That seems like you changed the vision. So what you did in keeping that seller business, and you kept it not because you were going to grow it and have it be ginormous. You kept it because of VAA. You made VAA the focus of everything. And so it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to keep my foot in both boats and see which one grows to be bigger. It was like, no, VAA is the focus. And this Amazon seller brand is going to continue to power and push us into what we're becoming.
Yeah. And it was funny because at that point in time, the seller account was much bigger. I needed VAs because it was growing and I needed teams of people because the business was profitable. But I realized that, okay, I'm onto something here that has much better potential. And then I don't wait until I'm reaching a point that, I need to decide what to go. I left.
You stopped focusing on that side of it, continued to maintain it, but you stopped focusing on building. So when you're building something, focus on building one thing.
Yeah, I think so.
And everything else you do should contribute to building that one thing. That's really, really powerful. So what do you think are some of the biggest roadblocks that people come up to as they're trying to monetize their mental capital? So think back, we've already talked about a lot of focus, but anything else? What comes up for you as another large challenge that entrepreneurs face as they're trying to monetize mental capital?
I think a lot of times they do not recognize the power of what they have at hand if they invest in marketing. A lot of people, they try to do everything themselves. It's funny that, even me, as my entire business is based on delegating, to other people, but it's for assistance. And I think the only time that we actually, grew tenfold was when we started investing a lot of money that we almost didn't have at that time into marketing, including like going to events, exposing our service to a lot of people, basically. And at that time, that was a challenge. And we really thought about it a lot because we thought, okay, it's going, it's working. Let's grow slowly. Every time we'll have the funds to go to the next step. And here we jumped like 10 steps. We took a loan and we invested in, at that time, I think it was like Prosper was the first time that we actually like taking a booth. And then we said, what the hell with it? Let's take a double booth over there. And it was a completely different thing because before that, we were selling to our service mostly to Israelis. And I just went to small, gatherings of Israeli sellers and, I had a podcast here, a podcast there, and Facebook groups, but it was all small. And that was a big step upwards. And I think it's something that a lot of sellers are afraid to take this step. And there is a very good book by Grant Cardone.
10x versus 2x, is that the one?
Yes. It sounds why would I know it's bullshit or something, but for us, it really worked because don't think of what's the next step. Think of what's the next 10 steps and aim over there already. And, even if you fall, you'll not reach 10, but you'll reach 8, so you're already way better than way you did before. And I keep this strategy from that moment on. So for us, a challenge would be to think above your regular what's the next step to come? What's the next 10 steps to come and aim over there already?
I have is it Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy?
What?
The book, 10x versus 2x?
No, I think it's Grant Cardone that wrote it.
I have a rule. If I come across and find a book that's mentioned by 2 or more people that I really respect, I immediately buy it. And
it's called the 10x Mentor.
10x Mentor. Ah, there we go. 10x Mentor. I love it. I am super excited. And the 10x versus 2x book that I was mentioning before, it talks about the same exact information.
Yeah, very interesting now to see it.
Maybe if you liked that book a lot, maybe that 10x versus 2x would be interesting as well. I love what you said there in terms of just digging in and thinking bigger for what's there. So That's a huge leap of faith, right? Like, I
Mhm.
know how expensive those booths are at Prosper. We too purchased a double wide booth. We had a double wide last year. We did a 10 by 10 this year, and we're going to do a 10 by 20 next year. It's not an insignificant amount of money you're investing. And not only that, but you're traveling across the world.
It's everything. It's like flights and bringing people from Israel. Just the flights, it's thousands of dollars. And yeah, so for us, it was a big amount of money that we didn't have at that time. And we realized that, okay, we cannot continue to grow. We have to take the market. There's a lot of potential here, and we cannot just wait all the time to grow little by little until we get there. We have to get there and then see that, it works. So sometimes these risks, they do not work. So you have to be prepared for that. But in the same time, no pain, no gain. You have to understand, don't grow comfortably, grow, uncomfortably.
As you consider and look at those different pieces, what did you do to figure out how? So you didn't have the cash. What did you do to figure that out?
Well, it was a loan. It was family members and banks that helped us to get there. And at a certain point, we could afford like a 10 on 10 booth. And we said, no, if we do it all the way. I mean, we want to, be over there and that people would spot us. So it was almost at a certain point, like fake it until you make it type of game, because we're not that big at that point.
Was that the Prosper Show last year?
No, it was 3 years ago.
3 years ago. Gilad, that is awesome. I actually remember I saw your booth last year, and it was a 10 by 20. That's the only Prosper Show in person that I've missed, is the year before that. And then I obviously saw your booth this year, and we were like literally like backdoor neighbors. And I think next year we're even like cross door neighbors. We like to go to the same spots over there. I love that you leaned in that way. You mentioned like put your back to the wall. This is yet another example of you putting your back to the wall, right? Like going out and borrowing that money and saying like, no, we're going all in or not going at all. Like you did it again in this situation. You borrowed a bunch of money and said, look, no, we are gonna make this happen.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much the only way, because that pushes you to find solutions and to figure it out, right? Okay, we've already invested this amount in order to be at Prosper. Now, how are we going to get the maximum out of Prosper, for example, and how we're going to get the leads? And you start to plan everything according to that. And without that, you would go, okay, so let's not go to Prosper. Let's go to somewhere in Europe, a smaller, event of, 100 people. And then you think, okay, what should I do in order to cover that cost, which is 1 divided by 20 of, and you'll get to the results that you aimed for. And here we had to aim big in order to cover it.
I just realized that it's the 10X Mentor is actually, I either purchased it already at one point or it's included in my Audible. So you know what I'll be listening to later. Is that the book that you would recommend for helping people have this mindset of all in?
I think, well, the first book that I would recommend, that the one that I started, it was way, that's what pushed me to become an entrepreneur. I would say, I think it's called The 4-Hour Week.
The 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss. There are some things that he says in that book that kind of blow my mind in terms of just like, wait, really? And I think some of it, I mean, there's a grain of salt to be said of anything that's in there. Just the power of assume nothing. Like this guy does things in that book that you're just like, wait, really, that he did that? I mean, he got some amazing advice on, growing a business and everything that comes out there. And I feel like Alex Hormozy's in a similar boat of just like, holy crap, these guys are doing some cool stuff. So I'm going to have to go listen to that again. I haven't listened to the 4-Hour Work Week in a long time. It's been a long time. It came out in 2008. It's been a hot minute. All right, 4-Hour Work Week and then 10X Mentor are the two that you would recommend from that standpoint. As we finish up the podcast here, I have one more question I want to ask you, 2 or 3 more questions. If you could go back in time and, let's imagine that Gilad from the ski, he's working for the tour company, and you could just meet him in a restaurant or call him on his cell phone and be like, all right, Gilad, this is Gilad from the future. And most of the time, the answer to this question is something like invest in Bitcoin or something, like I'm not talking about invest in Bitcoin. What would you tell him to monetize his mental capital? What hack or tip or trick or book would you tell him to read? What would you tell him to do differently that might help him monetize his mental capital more effectively?
I think it's a good question, because have I told Gilad from the past to skip the things that I learned and to go directly to what I know now? then he would not really, feel how it is to be with the back to the wall, for example. Maybe it was crucial for me to go through all these steps in order to, feel the pain and take the decisions from there. But obviously, like we discussed in here, well, first of all, let's go, before that, as an employee, don't hope that you'll become like semi-owner of a business while working. And I was always tempted by my previous employer to stay in the company and, to get better benefits and to get maybe some small percentage of something and to have big plans for the future if I stayed and so on. And that kept me over there. It's not worth it. I mean, if you have this fire within you that you want to create your own thing, go for it. Okay. And you will never reach the same results by working and building something for somebody else. Maybe for you, it's the best, to be an employee and that's fine and you're happy with what you're doing. That's all good. But if you have this entrepreneurship fire within you, go for it. Don't try to become an entrepreneur for somebody else, as an employee.
I too had that situation. And if my mentors or my bosses at the time ever listened to this episode, it's not that what they were offering me wasn't generous or interesting, but there's something to be said of becoming a co-founder or a founder that's just different than being an employee who comes in later and isn't putting as much on the table when your back's not to the wall. And I think taking that risk or leaning in that way, being willing to put everything on the table, all your blood, sweat, and tears, there is something very different. And yeah, I think I did that like early in my career, but even before I graduated from college, I tried multiple times and failed miserably. And then I went and worked for an advertising agency for a couple of years. And then I moved out to Georgia and found a business partner who would lean in and help me build Data Automation, which is the first automation company that I built. And that was where I went all in. But going all in, I moved across the country, right? Like I was willing to take that risk to go out there and gain an investor's trust to lean in and build Data Automation. So 100% agree with you that's a solid thing to tell them, hey, the percentages that this guy's offering you, they're nice and that's cool, but you have the heart of an entrepreneur. It's time to go lean in, go all in.
Yeah. And that would have saved 5, 6, 7 years of my life. Yeah. Still, working as an employee. Plus, I remember that the boss told me like at one time, like this is himself talking to me. So he said like, I always think of my business. Everything I do, it's always in my head all the time. When I go to the gym, I think, when I do push-ups, I think of what else can I do in the business? You should do the same. And then I would think for myself, like, why am I not doing that? I really I want it to work. I'm investing in it, and so on. But my heart and soul is not in this business. And only later on, because it was not mine. And only when it's yours, then suddenly you're going to the gym and you're thinking about what's the next, the answer to do this and all these million things that you have to do all day long because now it's yours.
And you've got like so many things dependent on this thing that you're building.
Right.
You can't do it any other way but dig in. Okay. So final 2 questions for you. One, you just stepped into an elevator. You have 60 seconds and the guy in the elevator says, yeah, I'm an Amazon seller. What do you do? So you got 60 seconds to tell him what you do. And then right after that, I want you to give any tip, trick, hack, or book you've read over the last year or two that's really helped you upscale your ability to monetize your mental capital. So first, you got 60 seconds starting now.
Right. So first of all, we are also an Amazon-focused company. We recruit virtual assistants from the Philippines, and then we train them specifically to work with Amazon sellers like yourselves in order for them to do everything for your business. If it's social media, if it's PPC, if it's your Seller Central account, if it's graphic designing, everything, in order for you to focus on growth and not doing everything yourself, rate starts at $5.50 an hour. That's one thing. I think it was even faster than a minute.
You still got like 15 seconds there, my friend.
All right. You can even hire somebody part-time job, for even 3 hours a day instead of a full-time job. Just don't do everything yourself.
Just don't do everything yourself. I love it. You went for it. And Gilad, you said, look, I'm the kind of guy who I'm going to go for it. And you just did it again. All right. So tip, trick, hack, or book you've come across over the past year.
It's called The Cult of We. It's about WeWork. Adam Neumann, the founder of WeWork, the working space, the co-working space. Now they reached chapter 11, but is no longer a part of this. He walked out with like $2.1 billion out of it. He got the worth of the company up to $47 billion. So it was huge. And first of all, I recommend the book, The Cult of We, it's called. But there's also like, I think it's an Apple TV series about WeWork. I think it's called We Crashed because it's like the rise and fall of WeWork. But I love it because I learned a lot about people that are driven from passion. And it's not only about numbers and, being the best analyzers of, where you could go but really like having a dream and pushing it and not being afraid of going through the window in order to get things done for you. It's a cool series.
The Cult of We. I love it. We Crash is the series. That's awesome. Really appreciate it. I've got it up here on my Audible. I'm adding it to my wish list. Gilad, thank you so much for joining this episode. If our listeners want to reach out, what's the best way to get in touch?
So VAA Philippines, so www.vaaphilippines.com or service@vaaphilippines.com.
Beautiful. Thanks so much for joining us. Over now.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.